Throughout this whole course, I have had to use a variety of media technologies, some of which I have not previously experienced, such as new programs and equipment. I have had to use these technologies in all stages, research, planning and construction of my final products. One of the main programs which I used was Photoshop. I used this last year, therefore I was already very familiar with the tools such as text, crop and rubber, in which I used again for the construction of my poster and magazine. I use the text tool often so that I can insert text where relevant for my title, cover lines and building block, which are conventions that are seen on posters and magazines. I also use the crop and rubber tool so that I could select the useful part of the images and get rid of any unwanted background, which I use to insert my own backgrounds, giving it a professional look. I also use Photoshop for my genre research, mood boards and planning. I did this to show my understanding of the genre, and it was also very effective in Photoshop due to the many tools that can be used to make something look creative. However, this year I also learnt how to change the exposure of an image, which I use for the construction of my magazine and poster main images, giving it a yellow/brown look. I also used Photoshop for the captions, title, release date and building block, which had to be in the correct format to upload into Final Cut. Final Cut Pro 7 was a very important program in the construction of my trailer. This was a new media technology to me, and I found the use of this very effective due to the professional results you receive by using it. To ensure all of my files were secure and did not go offline, I had to keep my files in the same location at all times and then use the import selection to allow access to them on Final Cut. Throughout the use of this, I had to constantly render the files so that they were viewable and therefore allowed me to edit them. Another useful tool I used very frequently was the trimming tool and also the use of in and out points. Both of these allowed me to adjust the selection of the video/sound that I wanted to use, therefore keeping the useful part of the file. In between each of the video files, I was able to use transitions so that the transitions between each of the videos were not constantly exactly the same. This allowed my trailer to give a more professional overall look and ensured me emphasising the genre of my trailer and also what stage of Todorov's theory was being shown, as by adding fades, it suggests a more calm tone, therefore connoting the equilibrium. Another key tool that I was able to regularly use was the pen tool. The pen tool was effective in the parts of my trailer where I wanted the music to fade in or out, which was primarily at the start. I did this by placing dots in the selection area and moving it until I was pleased with the result. Similarly to this, I was able to adjust the volume of the files either gradually or sudden. A tool which I was very unfamiliar with until nearer to the end of the project was keyframing. I used keyframing at the very beginning of my trailer to create a Ken Burns effect so that the text would move along the screen. I did this by gradually moving the text along the screen in my chosen direction and adding to the keyframes. I used this effect as it allowed me to show some of the backstory that was behind the narrative and emphasise the event that had previously happened. The majority of my shots were inconsistent with the lighting due to the natural lighting that I used in a certain room. Therefore, I found the use of the three-way colour correction very helpful. By using colour correction, I could adjust the tone of the room so that it was consistent throughout. Similarly to this, I found that some of my shots were too dark. Therefore, the use of brightness and contrast was effective, allowing me to combine this effect with colour correction so it looked as realistic as possible. Also, effects that I believe were effective, especially in connoting my genre, were bad TV and noise. I used bad TV for my captions so they were more interesting and had a jittery effect, therefore showing the disruption. Also, through the use of adding this Photoshop format, I was able to adjust the length of the captions and also the timings so that certain words could come up after the other pieces of text. I also used the noise effect to give me a subtle CCTV camera effect implying the narrative of obsession. Another program that I used was GarageBand. I found this effective in the construction of my trailer as it provided me with sounds and sound effects. The effects that I used were a news report, heartbeat and phone call. I also used it for the building up of tension and as an impact, which were a drone and a crash. The use of the internet was also very resourceful by supplying me with knowledge and websites that were very helpful in all of the stages. I used WordPress to blog my posts for research, planning and construction, allowing me to view my work and showing my progression. I also learnt how to add a poll straight onto WordPress using PollDaddy. I used this in the research so that I could receive audience responses about my poster, magazine and trailer and what they would most like to see featured on them. I was also able to visit copyright and royalty-free music sites such as Purple Planet and Bensound. I primarily used Purple Planet and was able to use the soundtrack of the site and upload it onto Final Cut. Through the use of my iPhone, I was able to download a voice changer app, allowing me to experiment with different effects and email them so I could view them on the Apple Macs, which is where the program Final Cut and GarageBand are accessible on. In the construction of my magazine and poster, I used a DSLR for the first time, and this allowed me to take professional looking images so that the overall look of my magazine and poster were professional. Through using the DSLR, I could experiment with the settings and focus so that I could get the best results for my images and the location that they were taken. I also had to use the LED light for the construction of my magazine and poster images. I used this so the lighting was effectively lit due to the images being in a dark lit area. I also used this in my planning as I wanted to experiment with the lighting before I used it properly. I also used the light in my trailer when the killer is in some of the shots as I wanted to create a sense of enigma through the use of the lighting. The last two pieces of equipment I used, mainly in the construction of my trailer, were the video camera and tripod. I used the video camera rather than the DSLR because for video in circumstances I thought it would be easier to control. The tripod was also very helpful because it helped stabilise the shots in my trailer that were still.